family has come to the conclusion, and I think they're right, that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And yet there's this basic understanding that energy is not just something that's moving, but it's matter, it's dark matter, it's in the gases, the nebula, the trees, the flowers, the grass, the water, the air, the earth, all of them, if you break it down, they're little flavors of energy, and all these little flavors of energy are interacting and giving rise to everything we know, and even our speculation, because that's where we're going today. Because wait, it doesn't stop there. These spoken words and the thoughts they give rise to, energy. And, depending on your metric, a thought is somewhere between 4.6 calories and 1/10 of a calorie a minute. Isn't that interesting how they do that? But something's weird, because with the human being, we became uniquely aware. And the mind and the body, there are these huge, complex energy transfer grids. Think about that, transfer grids. Look at just the lungs. You see, both oxygen and CO2 are different currencies that have a different worth in different environments. And there's a trade-off. There's a table inside your lungs and within your systems that trades oxygen for CO2. Currency, a trade-off, transfer grids. And consciousness is perhaps the subtlest and most fine gradation of this energy dispersal, this energy transfer system. And I've said before, the mind looks like it's a huge step-down transformer, taking this huge energy that is everything and stepping it down consciously through symbols and language, and stories and metaphors, but also unconsciously. And this is what Freud and Jung really got onto. And Jung took Freud's thinking and understanding of the unconscious and began to see there were these little energy units. And it was helpful to think in terms of these units. The mother unit, little complex called archetype. The father unit, little complex. The child, the treasure, the world, the journey, all of these are little packets, little flavors of energy and consciousness. And they're designated. In other words, mother is a whole series of, like oxygen goes to water, mother is all of these experiences of what your mother took place. Now, all of this is happening. You look at the whole gig of energy transfer from Big Bang up to now and how it's happened. And the three essential processes, for those of you who haven't been following us, are complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability. I had a parishioner at a Unitarian church tell me how the universe was totally indifferent, didn't care. And I asked him, I said, well, do you care? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, so it just took the universe 13.7 billion years to evolve care and compassion. You see, we can see through all these different energy exchanges, something is reaching. Something has become aware of itself and is reaching. And literally, this energy transfer system, it's not just happening in us, our both body and our mind, but it is us. We are this energy transfer system, and we're waking up to it, and we're waking up to reflecting on what it's reaching for. All of the things that are going on inside us, they're trying to balance. They're trying to reach for a new tomorrow. That's what the human family's been doing. Everything is energy converted. What is it William Blake said in Marriage of Heaven and Hell? He said, I don't want to go to heaven, I want to go to hell, because energy is pure delight. How do we move into the stream of energy? I think this is what the Tao is all about. It's the unfiltered, undualityized energy that is the oneness of being. So today we're talking about energy, and I'm taking it from the level of mind, because we can see the energy exchange. We can light a fire and watch the oxidation and see the energy change hands. but there's something going on inside of us. And what I want our listeners to get a little bit of drift of is that what's going on in you is the same thing that's going on in the flower, in the galaxy. It's energy. And in the human being, that energy seems to be reaching for something. I think if we, why I'm a Jungian is pretty much because it allows us to at least have some metric, some understanding of these subtle and different flavors of energy and how they interact and create health or dis-ease. Now, I just laid out a whole lot. This is, I always say I open with a shotgun blast, just shoot it all out there. Marianne, I'll turn it over to you. What say you when it comes to everything is energy and mind?
Well, if everything is energy and we're conduits for that energy, then there's this flow of energy that is continuous and always unchanging. And so it's but when it gets into our consciousness, then you spoke of the archetypes of, let's grab mother, for instance. So when that energy comes into my consciousness and my experience of mother in this earth, in my life, it's going to create a different picture, a different kind of manifestation on how I'm going to live out my life versus what someone else who had a different kind of experience of mother, and yet that archetype is still valid, it's still there, it's still universal. And so when I think of the energy, for me, one of the searches I've always been on is, what is it that we do that stops this flow? And how can we remove those barriers and start to allow that pure energy to flow through us? And I think we've talked about this several times on self-examination and really kind of digging in and figuring out, well, what is that universal mother archetype versus my experience of that mother? And then kind of bringing those together. So that's kind of where I go with this. Yeah.
How about you, Bob?
Well, there's so much that could be said. First of all, no one really knows what energy is. We observe it, we measure it, we think about it, we theorize about it. But the most we can say is that energy and matter are interchangeable. They're the same thing. They're different frequencies, although that term doesn't really capture it all. But this interchangeability of the two is a fundamental property of the universe. And it's happening all the time. You mentioned a lot of different types of energy. You got thermal energy coming off of a fire. You've got chemical energy. You've got kinetic energy. When something's moving, it has this kinetic energy. You've got what physicists call organic energy, and that's what you're getting at in terms of thoughts. And I'm with you 100% on Jung's conception of how this flow of energy enters the organism, the human organism. And you mentioned archetypes. Well, archetypes are not what we really experience. What we experience is the complex that is filled in by the archetype. And that's what you were getting at, Marianne, in terms of the archetype of mother and our conception of mother. All we have is our conception of the universe. And what happens is when, at least what Jung was saying or theorizing, is that when this energy comes up, it has this universal form, but we can only capture it in a vessel that is created by our experiences. And that's the complex that is our experience of the mother. But I think that we're on the verge of something new. And that's recognizing that every time we have an interaction with anyone or with anything in the universe, we are transforming that energy within ourselves. And just that knowledge gives us both great power, Spider-Man would say great responsibility.
And
Because
cause to question.
Exactly. We have the choice to do something with that energy as we're transforming it through the circuits in our body and the electrochemicals that are going on in our nerves and all of this stuff that results in thoughts. So it gets back to the same question that Marianne raises all the time, and that's, what do we do with it? What choices do we make in our lives? And the fact that we realize now that these energy packets are coursing through us and constantly moving and creating our thoughts, we have the possibility of using those thoughts in positive ways. And that gets back to getting in sync with the Tao
and now we're
like
at the point where we have to say it's not just about energy, but it's about the discernment of energy, how we use it, and to realize and be honest. I mean, I've done a lot of counseling, and if you've had really bad parents, you got complexes that are not healthy, and you have complexes that have a toxic nature, and there's a certain way of addressing those. And I really like Marianne's concept of conduit, because I think that that's where each tapped in to this energy. And every time we eat something, that energy system reboots, if you will. This whole concept also that Marianne laid out about a universal mother, which makes me see that there's a higher order of archetypes. That the universal mother archetype contains the father archetype, the child archetype. It's almost like there's this overarching Gaia mother archetype, which is really helpful to think about. And I want us to see that each of us, each of our listeners, each of our listeners, you are the vortex of wonderment where the great Rumpelstiltskin circuit is taking dross and turning it into gold. It's you. Seriously, it's you. Now, does that mean you never get angry? No, it just means when you get angry, you put it in the right place. Does that mean you never retreat? No, it just means you retreat at the right time. You see, there's a way of strategically addressing the energy that's coming into you, and one of the first battles is truth. How do you be honest with that? Bob, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to finish my thought.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that Jung had defined an archetype that was the collection of all of these universal archetypes, and he called it the self. And the self is the balance that we achieve within ourselves, and within our little s self, to make that energy most appropriate for our situation and to again move us forward. He called that process individuation, where we find our true purpose in life and we move toward that. And the self archetype, as the balance of all these other archetypes and complexes, is how we are able to stay the course, if you will.
Yeah.
Maintain that balance within the Tao.
And I think, Marianne, you intoned it. It's the measure is health and wholeness. How do we?
Well, I think we're all looking for that, and one of the things that struck me is that across, and this was something that Jung brought out as well, across diverse cultures in different times, where these same kind of images and these same kind of ideas spring up. And so it's kind of like, where does that come from? And it's not like the Egyptians were talking to the Mayans, right? And yet within all of these diverse cultures, these same concepts arise. And that's kind of what I meant by that overarching archetype. And then when it hits us and we have to have our lived experience And then I don't think we can discount the brain either in all of this. And our physical, the actual physical part of our brain that gets lit up. You know, a lot of the unconscious, you know, and I think Jung and Freud, and when all of these concepts were brought out, it was this big, mysterious, deep, dark place that, you know, not many people had access to. But I think that has changed. I think we are becoming much more aware of and accepting that there is this unconscious that is operating within us, and we can tap into that. We can use that, and we can direct our lives in a much healthier way when we can recognize all of these complexes within us that are part of self, and then be a better self, right?
And I'm thinking, as you're speaking about different, especially painted art, how something transforms in us, something shifts, something changes. You know, and as you're also speaking, it's amazing, you know, even since archetypes and since computers and electronics and psychology, all of these are ways of trying to talk about those things that we perhaps cannot see at first sight. And, you know, I keep thinking of semiconductors. Like an LED is a semiconductor. In other words, it doesn't let all the energy through. It lets a lot through, but it uses a little piece of it on the way. And it does something with that. And it seems to me that we have all these semiconductors, and each time one makes lights up, another one gets affected. And it's this huge, again, I want us to see this. This is a mishmash of energy transference. Think of what's happening with every breath. I'm serious. Man, I looked up the lungs the other day. Unbelievable. And you know what else I looked up? Lithium batteries. Talk about an amazing thing. Over and over, we're seeing how energy is stored and how energy is used. And we're using those ways to understand how that's happening in us. And the whole concept to me of the one energy finding an infinite number of expressions. And Bob, you've said this in previous podcasts. As much as we'd like to think that we're alike, there's no way we can get in each other's real shared space. We have to, there's a trust issue that has to be at play. We are each unique. And as much as I love both of you and know both of you to a large degree, you're still mostly unknown. And I say that with the full knowledge that I'm mostly unknown to myself. There's that self again, in which all things are dancing. So, again, our listeners...
Another interesting little paradox that goes hand in hand with that is that as we encounter each other, not only we can't know each other, but we're projecting onto each other something from internal within ourselves. So we're seeing a mirror to ourselves, but we're also seeing a play that we're creating and projecting upon the people we encounter.
And half the time we don't even know we're projecting.
Complicated.
Half the time we don't even know we're projecting.
All the time. That's all we have.
Well, we can only see out of our own eyes.
But
right?
here's the thing,
and I think being aware of that is very important, and being aware that what I'm seeing may not be the reality that you're seeing.
And there's a question.
How do we?
There's a question that underlies that we can ask ourselves. What is being compensated? What am I compensating? When I project and I'm aware of it, I have to say, okay, why am I doing that? What am I struggling for to be balanced here? And that's what it comes down to.
What can I learn from this? That again, everything we're doing is a learning experience. That's what our life is. And
at least that.
What are we learning from these encounters?
Yeah. Well, but I don't think I can't think of energy without thinking of power. And so when we interact with each other, when you're talking about a balance and what are we learning, we're learning how to negotiate power between us. And so I think that is another underlying piece of all of this that is continually happening. And we want to, finding a balance, and go back to what you say every time, Bob, is balance. And how do we strike that balance? How do we find that?
Well, one thing we have to realize is that we can't stop it. We can't stop the flow. The flow is going to go through us one way or the other.
We can jam it up.
But that's not stopping it. That's just creating stress within ourselves,
right?
Which then comes out in a different way. But the energy itself is not going to be stopped. And if we're hung up and creating this internal stress, in a sense, we're amplifying the energy, which is going to come out and usually in a negative way.
Yeah. And now here's a fundamental rule of energy. It's fundamental. Energy loves symmetry. Whether it's thermodynamics or it's the universe, it's trying to recreate a balance, a symmetry that allows all the pieces to exist. If you look at the word, what's it called when all the parts of your body working together?
Homeostasis.
Homeostasis. I mean, every organ is tugging, but they tug in a way that is symmetrical and balanced. If one of them starts tugging more than the other, that's called dis-ease. And usually there's some chemical imbalance that can be seen in a blood test, which you should get if you have any imbalance. And over, we see that we're all struggling for this. And sometimes we're struggling for it in ways that the balance is more unhealthy than the lack of balance. Because what happens is we have to go into denial and all kinds of defense mechanisms to keep the balance. And this is another aspect of energy management. And basically what your life is and my life is an energy management system that has become aware of itself. And, the deer is an energy management system, but it doesn't know it's an energy management system. We have that knowledge, and we are working on what the universe, I am convinced, is doing through us. And that's trying to connect us consciously and in a way that creates true health and true wholeness for everybody.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bob.
The idea of symmetry is also an interesting concept. And you put that next to the concept of balance. And you put the two next to the concept of energy flow. There has to be an imbalance for energy to move. It goes from negative to positive in electrical energy, or from high energy state to low energy state in the case of thermal energy or radiant energy. So there's always a balance, but that brings us back into balance. This rule of symmetry. So again, that's another overarching balance between imbalance and balance.
Yeah. It is mind-blowing because the fact is right now, what a lot of people in America are doing to keep their own psychic balance is putting the very fabric of the world that their balance depends on into a greater state of imbalance. And this is part of our waking up to the great energy system that is this earth that gave rise to us and that continues to try to breed us and ask for an honest partnership, if you will. Energy management.
Yeah, I think and you, in the United States right now, talk about imbalance. We're having an identity crisis, and everything is out of whack. And people are wanting to go back to something that makes them feel balanced and comfortable. And yet, you're right, change happens with disruption. Change happens with chaos. Change happens. That's the only thing that makes it happen. And so the amount of energy that we're seeing being released right now is
And
mind-boggling.
it gets back
It's
to the idea of, are you going to try and stop it, or are you going to let it flow?
Yeah.
And if you
Wow. You know, taking responsibility for being an energy translation center, that's big, especially when you know you are the place where the universe is reaching for something new. They're not making new deers. They're not making new kinds of monkeys. They're not making, well, insects, yeah, nature's still doing that. So, this whole energy transfer system, everything is energy, and here we are. Bob, final comments?
Well, let's get with the flow. Let's do what Lao Tzu said 3,000 years ago. Let's find the way of movement within this energy matter system that we're part of, and move with it in the way that the universe is, I'll throw in an anthropomorphism, is hoping we will. Let's figure ways to look at ourselves, to look at ways we can stop negatively charging our actions, and figure ways to flow more positively with the universe.
Amen. Align our energy with the energy. Marianne?
I like it. Well, I kind of go back to the first thing that you said, Bob, was no one really knows what energy is. And yet we see it. We see the effects of it. We see that it's there. There are very smart people that actually can measure it and store it and do different things with it. But I kind of go to the whole, I love the idea that we are responsible for what we do with the energy that flows into us. And so being able to get in touch with who we are and why we're the way we are, and being able to move that energy out into the world in a way that's beneficial for all. And I think that's, I'll just end with that. Yeah.
Amen. Where we've been today is huge, because it says something about us. And what I've learned is there's a place where energy inside of us is being influenced and bent and twisted and sent into whole new houses and mirrors. It's called art. It's a culture creator. It's created huge cultures. It's where we try to take the energies inside us and somehow get them out of us and show a piece of us that explains something that's inexplainable. I think of Salvador Dali. I think of Picasso. I think of Renoir. I think of Da Vinci. These people changed the world. They changed the way we work. We saw the world. I mean, at the same time we were splitting the atom, Picasso was splitting the picture into broken, seemingly disconnected pieces. We were seeing in a different way art, whether it's dance or on a canvas or a sculptor or music. It's an energy shifting system. Well, that's where we're going next week. We're going to dive into art and delight in the great journey of the human family and how artists have been the ones at the tiller all the time. God's peace, my friends.